Good evening, everyone. It's Mayor Weinstein. I'm joined with Mayor Jolovitz. We're going to be discussing uh, Rabbi Meir Kahane. There's a lot of people, um, social media warriors for Israel, that lately are talking very positively about Rabbi Meir Kahane. And because of our background, mine with the Jewish Defense League and with Rabbi Meir Kahane, and certainly Mayor Jolowitz with the Jewish Defense League and with Rabbi Kahane, we have a lot that we could add on that topic. And it's very pertinent right now with exactly what is going on, what direction Israel could be headed in right now, what are the solutions. But it's very refreshing to see a lot of people, a lot of good people who are now acknowledging the truth of Rabbi Meir Kahane, at least for the survival of the Jewish state. Not every single principle, but a lot. Mayor, how are you tonight?
I'm well, thank you.
Excellent. I've sent you a few things. You sent me also a little bit on social media of lately what's going on. Some of these people, Yishai Fleischer has certainly said some positive about Rabbi Kahane. They always qualify to say, I didn't agree with everything. But so what could you add to this, Mayor?
Yeah, in fact, I've seen more than a handful of people who basically talk about the fact, in light of the hostilities that were directed against Israel, that Rabbi Kahane seems to have been right. In Hebrew, we hear the expression Kahane Tzedak. Kahane was right. A reminder to those people in the audience who might not know, Rabbi Meir Kahane was assassinated in November of 1990. His philosophy, November of 1990, is what people are saying today. He seemed to have been right. Now, it's rather remarkable that these same people seem to have demonized the rabbi on October 6th. And all of a sudden, after October 7th, they seem to come around to the thinking. Nothing has changed. His writings, his teachings, his ideology, nothing has changed. He wasn't around to change it. Nothing changed as well with the Arab ideology, with Islamic ideology. It's always been hostile to the Jew. But all of a sudden, the people who sit back as third-party observers, all of a sudden they're talking about the fact that he might have been right. And the reason that they say might have been right was, of course, precipitated by the atrocity of October 7th, 2023. What's rather remarkable is people seem to be somewhat short-sighted when the tragedy of the release of the Bibas family, talking about the mother who was not the mother at first, it was and the two babies, a 4-year-old and a 10-month-old, who were beaten to death and then tortured. Beyond that, once they were dead, rocks were thrown at them. And all of a sudden, people were reminded of the vulgarity of the Arab attitude towards Jews. I don't know why they needed to be reminded. One only needs to go back to October 7th. Had people forgotten between October 7th and the return of the Bibas family, all dead, that all of a sudden they were awakened to remember that the Arab was doing this to Jews? When you mention Rabbi Kahane, let me just throw this in very quickly. There's a very famous thing that Rabbi Kahane used to say, and it troubles me. I do a lot of lecturing, and I often begin my lectures by saying that the people who are supporters of Israel talk about the fact that October 7th was an unprovoked attack against Israel. That's the word that they use. It was an unprovoked attack. And they're wrong. And Rabbi Kahane used to point out when he was alive that it was in fact very much a provoked attack. The very presence of Jews living in Eretz Israel, in the land of Israel, is for the Arabs a provocation. The fact that there's a Jewish people, a Jewish nation, a Jewish flag that has a Star of David on it, every one of those things is a provocation. Now, it might be illicit or improper or immoral, but nonetheless, for the Arabs, their provocation was in fact the presence of Jews. And too many supporters of Israel seem to have forgotten that. The Arab didn't all of a sudden become evil on October 7th at 6:29 in the morning. That's not how it happened.
Many Jews are speaking out now against the idea of coexistence that has been propagated by almost every Israeli government. The issue of two-state solution, that seems to be falling by the wayside. The majority of Jews in Israel don't want to accept that at all now, and that's why many are reevaluating the positions of Rabbi Meir Kahane. But Meir, there's Arab parties in the Israeli Knesset. And those members of Knesset who are Arab from these Arab parties, they speak against the very idea of Israel as a Jewish state. And successive governments have demonized Rabbi Meir Kahane. They even came up with a law. And not only that, but they changed the educational format when the rabbi was alive, and certainly after he was assassinated, to propagate the myth of coexistence and to call anyone who embraces the ideology of Rabbi Kahane to be racist. Where do you see us going now? Is there a change going on with people that would go that far, to the Arab Knesset members that don't want to recognize the idea of a Jewish state?
It's a very appropriate comment that you made, and I'm going to look at it from a very different perspective. I have heard so many different pundits, analysts, politicians, diplomats in Israel and outside of Israel talk about the fact that this seems to be an appropriate time for Israel to, along with the support of the Western world and the so-called moderate Arab states, that they needed to re-educate Israel's enemies. They needed to re-educate them. And what here's, Donald Trump is a wonderful president for Israel. They'll never have another as good. In fact, this afternoon, just a few hours ago, he was asked what happened to this promise or this threat that all hell will rain down if all the hostages weren't released.
Right.
And he was somewhat embarrassed, tried to hide it. But what he said was, well, I basically told Bibi Netanyahu that Israel needs to do whatever Israel needs to do. And he's fully in concert with that thing. It was Israel that didn't do what it needs to do. Still, this misbegotten hostage exchange. When I say hostage for murderer exchange.
Right.
I want to ride that to, just a little further. There does need to be a re-education. The re-education needs to be on our part.
Mm-hmm.
We need to be re-educated. We need to be re-educated to understand that they are not going to be de-radicalized, that they're not going to be demilitarized. The re-education that needs to be taken on our part, and the mistake was made this past week by Benjamin Netanyahu. It was made by Donald Trump. It was made by Secretary of State Rubio, and it was made by Steve Witkoff, in which they were trying to justify this new, they don't call it a plan, but this new idea of moving the Gazans, the Palestinian Arabs, out of Gaza. And their comment was that it would be the humanitarian thing to do, which would benefit the Palestinians themselves. Well, I'm not looking to benefit the Palestinians themselves. The notion, as Biden would always say, Palestinians are not Hamas. The Palestinians are not Hamas. Well, the Palestinians are very much Hamas. All of them are very much Hamas. The re-education needs to be on our part. This notion of that we need to move them out so we can rebuild Gaza. And Benjamin Netanyahu said just a few days ago, and if they want to, they can come back. What is this nonsense of come back? These are people who have a genocidal ideology which calls for the destruction of the Jewish people. And for us to suggest, as we often do, and this is where we need to be re-educated, for us to suggest that the Palestinian civilian is innocent and a victim themselves of Hamas, we are getting ourselves in trouble.
Yeah.
What we need to do is re-educate the people to understand that Hamas is very much represented by the actions of the Palestinian people. The Bibas family was taken hostage by civilians, or so-called civilians. They were just terrorists who weren't wearing the uniform of Hamas. That's all. So yes, I do believe that there needs to be a re-education if there's going to be any future in the Middle East. And peace will only come through strength. It'll not come by any rapprochement between Arab ideology and Zionism. The re-education needs to be on our side to come to understand that before there was a state of Israel, in 1920, there were pogroms against Jews by Arabs. In 1921, there were pogroms by Arabs against Jews. In 1929, Jews in Hebron were beheaded. People were slaughtered. They were mutilated. There were the types of things that many books don't write about because they're just too heinous to discuss. From 1936 to 1938, there was the Arab Revolt. 510 Jews were slaughtered by Arabs. And all of a sudden, we seem to accept the Western world's definition that the Arabs are protesting this occupation, which the Western world seems to believe happened in post-1967, after the Six-Day War. I agree. Rabbi Kahane was right. This is who they are. This is who they are. And if an education or re-education needs to be done, it's in our schools, by our media. Theirs will never change. We have to understand that, and that'll be part of our re-education.
100%. Meir, we're going to leave it at that right now. We'll take this up again. This is going to be ongoing, obviously, with what's going on right now, but refreshing that many people now are talking about Rabbi Kahane and the plan and the idea and how to secure Israel as a Jewish state. So final words before we sign off.
Yeah, the final words. I know we do this a little more frequently than we used to. That
Yep.
the very nature of the ceasefire, this lull in the fighting, has been to Israel's detriment, and Israel will pay a very heavy price. Notwithstanding the fact that certainly Benjamin Netanyahu and Trump and Witkoff want the best for Israel, the ceasefire that they've whatever the right word might be, convinced Israel to participate in, we need to wake up. Because if all three phases, each phase 42 days long, if all three phases are actually implemented, it is a disaster for Israel in the future. What we need to do is understand that this ceasefire is a detriment to Israel's future, and it needs to be stopped.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Meir. We'll take it up.
Thank you.